Hi, my name is P.K. Kannan. I'm the Dean's Chair in Marketing Science and a Professor of Marketing at the Robert H. Smith School of Business, University of Maryland at College Park. If you look at the kind of interactions that consumers are having these days, what most of it I would term as social engagement. You have social media, which has become very popular. People are, spending a lot of time on that. And let's say that, consumers or users go on social media and then start clicking on different brands, and they like certain brands, they like certain posts or certain personalities, and so on. And all this clicking and liking brands have information. And just to give you an example, let's say a user goes in there and says, oh, I like United Airlines, and United Airlines had some message and they said like for it. And then they also liked a message coming from American Airlines. And so, they may be liking different brands. They could be liking, for example, Amazon. They could be liking Erasmus University, for example. So all those things are information that provides us some idea as to how consumers or users think about different brands and like those different brands. Now, that gives us some idea. So I can say United and American are somewhat competing for the attention of this person because they like both of them. So maybe if they're going to book a ticket, they may choose either of them. And so there's a basis for a competition between these brands. At the same time, there could be a basis for some kind of a complementarity between Amazon and some of these brands. So, if you had a few amount of data, that is, say, hundreds of consumers liking some of these brands, you can take that and analyze it and say, hey, I'm going to use these likes as a way of a distance metric between brands, and then use those distance metric and create a map, and I can put them in the map. But it's not humanly possible when you have millions and millions of data, right? Millions, because you have about 30, 40 millions of users going and clicking on these different brands, and you have hundreds of millions of data points. And so one of those papers that we worked on, we actually take 140 million data points like this and try to understand what is the information that is contained in it. And this is how AI helps us, because AI can handle a lot of information, and it can, in essence, pick up the most important relationships that are there in the data, and forget about all the noise that appears in the data, and then come up with a central structure of how these brands are related. And that's basically what we do in this paper, because we are using some deep learning and autoencoder techniques in order to analyze such data. So this has a lot of insights for managers. There are some expected things that we found. When we looked at the data, we found that all the car brands were all clustered together, so they're competing against each other. Luxury brands in one segment, and not so luxury brands in another segment, and so on. But what was surprising was there were some brands clustered together, and we really didn't find any, outwardly any clear relationship, because they are all in different verticals. To give you an example, we found Southwest Airlines clustered with Disney Cruise, and then also with the Hyatt Hotel. So we're wondering, what is the relationship? The relationship just comes from consumers liking these brands. And so you immediately have some nice insights here saying, well, maybe Southwest can do a cross promotion with Hyatt and Disney Cruise, because there are lots of consumers who tend to like these brands in a similar way. And so there is an opportunity for us to do something like this. So these are unexpected findings that you get from the data. And the other thing is, we looked at how the brands move over time. So we looked at Tesla coming up with the Model 3. When they came up with Model 3, it was a lower end price point model. And we wanted to know, how does the clustering change when they came up with a new model? Previously, they were clustered together with all these luxury brands like Maserati, BMW, Alfa Romeo, and so on. And when Model 3 came, their positioning really changed and started competing with more of the, Ford and GM Toyotas and Hondas and so on. So I think it gives you not only a static picture of what is happening in the market, but you can also get dynamic pictures of how things are changing over time. And this is great market research that can be done with easily and readily available data, because consumers keep touching these brands every day, every minute. And you can actually process this using AI and get some wonderful insights. So recently, we had a professor from Wharton who was organizing a conference on customer engagement. And he looked at our paper and he said, hey, why don't you send a paper which is basically a managerial version of what you have done? Because he was putting together a bunch of managerial articles that would be very relevant for CMOs. And I can actually send you a copy of this paper, which is cool. So we actually created a paper which was very managerially oriented. It's easy to understand. It can be digested quickly. And so we created that. And not only that, we have an app, which is basically a GitHub. You can go to the website and click on that link, and it opens up the map in front of you, and you can actually interact with the map and see, okay, what is this brand? What is near to this brand? You can zoom in and zoom out. It's a pretty cool thing that we did. And the reason was trying to show to people that it is not just pure academic research, but has a lot of application when it comes to using it by managers and also students. And I show this to my students in class and say, okay, play around with this and see how data that comes from your touch points can be processed, and you can get some cool insights as to how brands are interacting with each other. This is interesting because tweets have information. So when firms generate tweets and they put tweets out, and they're not doing it at random, they have some reason as to why they want to tweet. And they want to, of course, inform consumers as one stakeholders, but they also want to inform investors, people who are going to be trading. And then there is another stakeholder, which is becoming very common now, are these algos or the algorithms or the AI bots. Now, these AI bots are scouring the social media sites to see what information is out there about a particular firm, and then immediately they start acting on it and then provide advice to traders as to whether you should be trading on these stocks or not. And so there's a lot of things that are going on when somebody comes up with a tweet. And you can probably analyze the impact of tweet at the end of the day stock price, and that's basically what people do using what is known as event studies. So they use event studies and say at the end of the day, what's the stock price and how did they change over the last 3 days. But the tweets happen so often within a day. The end of the day is actually a combination of all the things that are going on, and so it's very difficult to understand what happens at the end of the day. So what we do is we actually associate tweets with the market microstructure movement. That is very millisecond movements of your price of your stock that happens, what kind of trading happens in a few milliseconds, and then we associate it with the tweet. And if you can really isolate that tweet and there is nothing else going on, then you can actually say, well, the variation that we see in the price, and we actually measure the price variance, and then we associate it with the tweet. Now, if the variance is very interesting, if a price variance is permanent, that means it has had a measurable impact on the stock. But it could also be noise. That is, people just trade and it is some commotion that's going on. There is a buzz going on, but then it's a temporary thing and the price settles down. So the variance is temporary. Now, these temporary variances are basically noise, and they are not very useful because they create costs for investors. And not only that, when they create so much uncertainty about stock price, overall, the firm has to pay a higher cost of capital, and it is a negative impact on the firm value. And so what we essentially say is we actually use these market microstructure price movements as a measure of how well your tweet is doing. Is it creating some permanent impacts, or is it just creating a buzz and a noise? And then we relate the attributes of the tweets to all the impacts and then say, hey, how should you design your tweet? Now, from a firm's viewpoint, you want the investors to react in such a way that it has a permanent impact on your stock price, right? You really don't want to create unnecessary movement in your stock price, because that's going to have a price to pay later on. And so basically what we essentially say is, okay, you want to impact the investor the right way and give them information about, about competitors, give information about your customers or your products, and associate it with clear words which are either positive in valence. And if you're talking about with competitors, you're then trying to compare against competitors and have a negative valence directed at the competitors. So we give very specific examples saying tweets which are basically just one unidimensional may not really help you much. But if you have multiple dimensions and focus on competition, comparing against competition, or highlight the benefits that customers are going to get with a positive valence, those things are going to impact investors the right way, and thereby you can benefit from these tweets that you're sending out. We cannot discount all the trades that happen is just done by human investors, and we probably think it is not human investors, but human investors aided by AI. Because these things happen so fast in milliseconds, you cannot be a retail investor like you and me going to the stock market and seeing a tweet and then trying to do it. But by the time we do it, it's long gone. The effect is long gone. So what we are thinking here is that it is basically generated by AI, aided by AI, and traders, institutional traders, have algorithms which actually jump on these newses and then start working on it. And so we think that most of this thing that we are seeing is basically a reaction of the institutional investors and rather than retail investors. I teach, courses in the digital marketing area. That's my specialty. I teach a course in digital marketing, and I teach a course recently in digital customer journey, digital advertising and promotions, and so on. And in all these courses, social engagement, market research using social data, and tweeting, and all these things are discussed. And certainly one of the ways that I actually do is the latest papers that I have, I actually make them into bite-sized, digestible content and use it in my class. And so one example is, I have a class on social media and social engagement, and this paper on market structure is something that I show them and say, hey, how useful it is. You may discount that the social engagement is just a buzz going on and you want to create a buzz, but it has a lot more than just creating the buzz. And then I also talk about this stock price data and say that, even when you're designing your tweets, you need to be careful that you're designing it the right way. You don't want to, unnecessarily create noise, which is going to be, bad in the long run. And so those are clear examples of how things can come directly into the classroom. And I also, allow them to play around with the apps that we create so that they get a clear idea as to how these things are used. And, they find it extremely insightful because when they come into class, they're thinking digital marketing, okay, I'm going to learn about social media, TikTok, and other things. But then we go very deep into, how do you design your advertising, how do you design your engagement with consumers, and when do you design your engagement with consumers. There are some interesting papers people have published, not me, but they talk about if you're sending out a social media tweet, when should you be sending it out, right? So those kinds of things, we bring it into the classroom, and that's one way of engaging them. The second way is, about 10 years ago, I worked with Marriott hotels, and then it was on multi-touch attribution. So I've done a lot of work in multi-touch attribution, and actually worked with Marriott on a consulting project with my student. And we actually developed a system for them to do multi-touch attribution because, people come through different channels and they want to know which channels is working best for them in terms of conversions and so on. So I actually made a case out of that interaction that I had with, and so that case is being used in my course. So I actually give them some examples of the real data, it's so that they can play around with it, and we show them how we can develop models get insights from it, and then decide how do you want to spend your marketing mix budget. So this is a good example of how you can bring in the research that you're doing directly into class. And not only that, I've done a lot of work in multi-touch attribution. So Marketing Science Institute, which is MSI, which is actually a semi-research body interacting with practitioners, they have webinars. They call in experts to do webinars. And I have done a webinar during the COVID time. I did a webinar on it. And so that webinar is online. The video is available for anybody to go and look at it. And so sometimes I give links to my students saying, hey, if you want to do something, you can go ahead and look at it to see a little more about what we are talking about in class. There's a lot of interaction that goes within classroom, like examples I gave you were within classroom. But there is also a lot of things that happen outside classroom. So I recall about a year ago, we had a student who was starting his own business, and he really wanted more information as to how to, it was a subscription model, and wanted to know whether the subscription model is going to work, how should they be engaging customers, and so on. So we talked outside of class and then tried to help him out and so on. So that's one way in where MBA students really interact. And even when they are out of school, so I interact with an ex-MBA student who's been graduated for about now 20 years, and who's in a very senior position in Amgen, in charge of all the marketing mix budget allocation that they do. So I interact with them on a regular basis. He pick my brain and say, well, these are the problems we have. And sometimes we do small projects, pro bono or otherwise, that might be of help to the students. And then the nice thing about having faculty who are at the cutting edge of their research is the MBA students really know who to turn to when they go into a work situation and they have a problem. They will immediately seek out help from many of the faculty. So many of the faculty that we have, some of them are Amazon scholars, some of them work with Microsoft during summertime. And they bring in all that experiences of working with these companies on research projects directly into the classroom. And we have another faculty called a STAR faculty. His name is Evan Starr, who actually works on non-compete clauses in employee contracts, right? And he has given deposition in Congress and with FTC and so on. And he brings all his knowledge into the classroom. Fascinating stuff. And so these are some examples where MBA students really get exposed to, it is not so as against, just going to another school where they will get case studies from Harvard Business School case studies and working with, content, which is pretty good. Here, what we do is we actually layer that with a lot of cutting edge research that is being done in-house so that they actually know that more than what other people would know, they kind of know what is going on right now. Or for example, right now, AI and Gen AI is big, right? So we are doing research with AI and Gen AI and how they can be used to analyze customer journeys. Now, this can be directly brought into class, which will never be able to be done if it's a different school where you really don't have that cutting edge research. So I think these are some examples of how faculty are engaging with students. In addition to that, sometimes MBA students engage with faculty as research assistants, work on research projects, and so on. So those things also help them to get jobs and then do some interesting things at work when they graduate. Many of our faculty, like me, they actually do some of the other kinds of interactions. So I actually go to Groningen. So I'm actually a distinguished visiting professor at Groningen in digital marketing. And so I visit there at least 3 or 4 times a year and engage with students at Groningen in their PhD program and the master's program. And I also visit Erasmus in Rotterdam. And I was recently in Maastricht down in South. And so, the interesting thing about our faculty is they are not just, just sitting in Maryland They are all, interacting with faculty across the world. And in fact, I have co-authors who are in Netherlands. I've done a lot of work with them. And so that's the interesting thing about, having a very research-oriented faculty, because they don't just bring the experiences of a local market, but they also bring in experiences in the international market and bring all those findings and, make it very useful for students. In fact, one of our MBA students actually worked in Rotterdam for a while for booking.com, I think, and I don't know where he is right now, but, so certainly many opportunities exist for students to not only, find jobs within the US, but they just go outside of US and find jobs. And many of the experiences that faculty bring in really helps in that.